Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have 4 letters from communities in Oregon that I'd like to enter into the record.
Without objection?
Thank you so much. So the city of Chiloquin is a city of under 1,000 people in rural Oregon. And they had remediated a brownfield site, winning the award for the Oregon Brownfield Project of the Year, and had worked very hard and realized when you only have 1,000 people, it's pretty hard to even write grants, let alone win one. So they were very excited about their grant for a municipal center. Not only would have been city offices, but also emergency shelter. It's a community that's affected by wildfire smoke more years than not. And emergency readiness center to respond to emergency with upgraded communications. So they had a grant awarded and obligated that you canceled. And can you explain to the people of Chiloquin why this grant was canceled?
Senator, and I know Senator Murray asked about a specific grant. Senator Ossoff asked about a specific grant. You're asking about a specific grant. I don't have all of the details on every single grant in front of me. However, I would have no hesitation whatsoever to be able to have a follow-up conversation to the extent you're interested, that Senator Murray's interested, that Senator Ossoff is interested, to go through all of those individual details. And it's possible that the issue that might be present on a particular request is something that can get fixed, that can get addressed as it relates to difference of administrative policy priorities from one administration to the next. I went through a bunch of different Alaska grants before we were here today, and I found that there were different, the grants might have an aspect that isn't consistent with this administration's policy priorities, but other aspects of it were. So we can work through that.
So this is a grant that was both awarded and obligated. How does a community proceed to plan, because they're contracting for design, they're contracting for construction, the grant's already been awarded, you unawarded it. It seems to me like once it's been obligated, that should be kind of like, okay, well, we'll take those priorities to the next set of grants rather than undoing the existing ones. So I think that's particularly upsetting to the rhythm of how communities can proceed with confidence if a grant that's already been awarded and obligated can be snatched back.
Yeah, Senator, I would encourage, and I'm going to be in front of House Appropriations tomorrow, and next week Senate EPW, which you serve on, and House E&C subcommittee. And for my message would be for all of your colleagues that if anybody wants to ask about a specific grant, I would encourage them to reach out to us right now, as opposed to waiting until we're here for a Q&A and I'm getting asked about a very specific grant, as opposed to your office contacting us and say, hey, by the way, when we're at the hearing, I would like to ask you all sorts of very detailed questions about this one specific grant, if you wouldn't mind bringing it. Because then in that case, Senator, I'd be standing here ready to answer 1,000 questions about every individual grant.
Well, there was a kind of a procedural question embedded in that, which is if a grant has been already obligated, and so here the community has contracted for design, perhaps for construction, isn't it kind of deeply inappropriate to then undo that at that point?
Senator, if it's not consistent with administration priorities, depending on how the program was appropriated by Congress, and depending on what the details are of that individual grant, that grant can be subject to cancellation. Okay.
I will follow up with a question on specifically why these grants were funded or unfunded. The second one is from a plan for a community health project to increase tree planting in a heat kind of dome section of a very poor part of Gresham, Oregon, and air conditioning and space to address respiratory illness. Does the community, does the philosophy, when you say it's inconsistent with the philosophy of the government, is the incoming government against addressing air conditioning to address heat emergencies or spaces to address respiratory illness during smoke emergencies?
You're asking about a specific grant. I would need the details of that particular grant to be able to answer.
Actually, I was asking about whether the philosophy is that the philosophy of the incoming administration that you're against. You undid you may have undid this for who knows what reason, but are you opposed to tree planting and spaces to address respiratory emergencies?
Tree planting is fantastic. We would encourage more of it, Senator.
Will you, would you look at these individual grants, which I'm sure there's so many of them. I know that they were done by kind of a huge swath of cancellation, but if you look at them and go, well, there's nothing about this that we oppose. We like to have community health centers built. Is there a possibility you'll restore those grants?
Senator, over the course of the rest of the fiscal year, it is our intent to continue to be spending money that was appropriated by Congress to fulfill our obligations and to follow the law. And it very well will end up including grants that were canceled. The way that the grant may be finalized under new terms might not include whatever the particular aspect was that led to its cancellation the first time, but I'm sure that there's going to be many examples of grants that will end up going back out the door, just not without that issue.
Yes, possibly you may be restoring grants, if I just summarize what you just said.
Yes.
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 The third one is a community health center in the town of the Grand Ronde, and have a place to coordinate national response to natural disasters. I know you're not going to give a response to this specifically, but in philosophy, it's not that the administration is against community health centers.
I remember during the first Trump term, that was something that there was an increase of funding to community health centers. That was a subject of legislation, I remember, because I was in the House at the time.
And the fourth one is an early learning center, and the administration is not against early learning center in philosophy.
I have not heard of any administration or any member of Congress or otherwise being against something like that.
Well, these are important grants. I think there may be elements of each of these grants that you don't particularly like they're going to put solar panels on the roof, or the wording of the grant used the word resilience, or said we're responding to heat emergencies from climate change. I'm sure there's words you don't like, but I hope when you review these grants, and you've stated your intention to spend the money in these categories by the end of the fiscal year, which is only months away, that you'll examine these. I'll get you a list for Oregon. I think it's in these small communities, it's so hard to even write a grant. And it's such a victory when they win a grant and say, we can finally solve a major community problem. And I know I'm over my time, Madam Chair, but I will close just with this note, because you've responded to the question of earmarks or congressionally directed spending on the revolving water fund. So in Oregon, we call these community-initiated projects. The communities say, here is our very top need, and will you fight to get us help, because we can't afford this water treatment on the front end or wastewater in the background. And I think very similarly, I think it is in Alaska, communities say, here's our priorities. Senator Murkowski is fighting for them. I think that that's kind of the best arrangement. It sounded to me like you didn't like the idea of us fighting for the top priorities for our communities, but I think it's absolutely our responsibility. Better to have the communities say what their priority is and us fight for them in some bureaucratic decision made 3,000 miles away or further away from Alaska.
Yeah, Senator, there are so many great examples of what's called congressionally directed spending, earmarks, where it's a member
Community-initiated projects.
Community-initiated projects.
Thank you.
Where a member of Congress, House, Senate is fighting for something that is filled with merit purely. It's a great project that's going to have extremely positive outcomes. There are many of those examples, and that's something that I'm not here to say, generally, encouraging or discouraging. That's a decision for Congress to make as to whether or not and how much to do it. My job is to make sure that the money gets out the door when Congress does. I don't want to use the wrong word, not congressionally directed spending.
Community-initiated projects.
Congressionally initiated funds. We'll make sure that the money gets out the door, Senator. The point as it relates to the description, the notes in the skinny budget as it relates to SRF is just the concern of how that pot of money has been used, how with regards to these funds. With that being said, I'm sure that there are many different examples of what was described there being good outcomes for a particular community. That a very thoughtful, congressionally initiated,
Community initiated project.
funding. So I was used to the term earmark when I was in Congress, but
You know,
we can call it something else now.
the reason I don't love congressionally directed is it's not that some invention of us up here that we just say, oh, it's what do we want? No, it's what have our communities identified they want. So I've been trying to get the Appropriations Committee to change its terminology to reflect what's actually happening, and I think it puts it in a strong light.